Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my channel. My name is George Kingori and I'm your online finance guy who speaks about all things finance. How you can be able to invest, how you can be able to save, how you can be able to grow, and how you can be able to improve your financial outlook. And today I'm going to speak as a development consultant, as a development expert. However, still on a financial note. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to speak about reasons why Africa is going to become the next economic powerhouse. Stay tuned, learn, grow, and glean, ladies and gentlemen. The first reason why Africa is going to be the next economic powerhouse is the young population, ladies and gentlemen. The average age of an African is 18 years old. 18 years old. A relatively young population. The next class of people, or in the next continent, is around 30 to 35 years old. We have a relatively young population. Why is a relatively young population important when you forecast high economic growth? The reason is that when this young population grows in the next 10-20 years, this young population is going to provide the biggest active workforce, ladies and gentlemen. Why are we seeing an economic slump in the European countries? It is because the European countries have a population of very old people who are beyond their prime. Ladies and gentlemen, to put this in focus, the average age of the people who have won a Nobel Peace Prize is 35 to 45 years of age. 70% of the people who have won this award are between that age, and a few people up to 55 years of age. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the age where people have the highest potential, have the highest creativity, and are the most productive, and Africa's population is going to that direction. So that is one of the reasons why Africa is going to be the next powerhouse, the population, ladies and gentlemen. The next reason is Africa has the most fertile soils, ladies and gentlemen. Even without adding fertilizer, Africa still has a lot of virgin raw land. Why is virgin raw land important? The reason virgin raw land is important in an increasing populated world. Food production is a critical factor, and especially economical food production, ladies and gentlemen. Africa's soil is among the most fertile in the world, is among the ones that require the least inputs, ladies and gentlemen, and is the one that will be able to feed the nations, ladies and gentlemen. Once mechanization comes into the African market, into the African countries, then they will be able to produce most of the food that will be nutritious and will be needed by the rest of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa will feed the world. Look and you will see, ladies and gentlemen. Then the third reason is Africa has the highest economic growth. Look at the economic factors that have been set ahead. African countries are among the top countries in terms of the highest economic growth, the highest growth in GDP per country, ladies and gentlemen. Africa has the highest growth, ladies and gentlemen. So people might argue, so Africa has a high growth. So what are we talking about in terms of real value, ladies and gentlemen? African countries have a low amount of output. However, because they are growing at a faster rate, you need to look at the GDPs in the 1980s, around 30 years ago, ladies and gentlemen. They were the same GDPs that African countries are playing around. So meaning in the next 30 years, African nations will be able to be the biggest economic drivers in the world. They are growing at an exponential rate. If you want to put it in focus, nations in Europe and in America are growing at the rate of less than 3%. In fact, some of them are growing at high rate, what they call high, at 1%. So African countries are growing and they are catching up, ladies and gentlemen. And before you know it, they will be where Europe is, ladies and gentlemen. The other major reason that Africa is going to be the next powerhouse is the fluidity of money, ladies and gentlemen. There is a lot of fluid movement of money in Africa, ladies and gentlemen. For me to be able to pay somebody money, I only need to go to my mobile phone. I do not need to go to a fancy gadget. I do not need to have internet. I do not have to need to have money in my account. I just go into my bank, withdraw with my non-technological phone, a normal phone, and send money through a mobile wallet to the next person. This is happening across Africa. Money is exchanging hands at a faster rate than even in Europe, ladies and gentlemen. And the fluidity of money is one of the factors that makes economic growth to be very high, ladies and gentlemen. So the money is extremely fluid in Africa as compared to other nations that are more developed and have higher capacity. So money is moving and money is changing lives. The next reason is technology adoption in Africa is extremely high, ladies and gentlemen. Because of the low age of the population, the adoption of technology, the adoption of computers, the adoption of technologies, the number of tech hubs and technological cities that are growing and are coming up is exponentially high. You just need to look at Silicon Valley is already sourcing for people in Africa to be able to develop their apps and their products, ladies and gentlemen. The African technology space is growing, and in the next 10 or 20 years, Africans will be the most technologically minded people because they are young and they are capable and they are learning. Ladies and gentlemen, technology is the next frontier. Africa is not going to jump the agrarian revolution, the industrial revolution, and come into the technological evolution, ladies and gentlemen. Watch out. Africa is coming. Ladies and gentlemen, the next reason is because of increased education. When you look years back, the penetration and the access of education to most Africans was limited. However, currently, the number of children who are going to basic education and to further education is increasing exponentially. When the rate was around 80% in the 90s, now it is around 95%, ladies and gentlemen. Even old people are coming back and entering the education system. The amount of education that the people are getting is higher and higher, and the quality is improving and getting better and better. Ladies and gentlemen, when education comes in any nation, economic growth is coming shortly after. So Africa is growing and people are learning and people are coming and people are going to change what Africa is all about. Ladies and gentlemen, the other reason is the reduced legislation and ease of doing business. African nations are increasingly finding the need to improve and ease the ease of doing business in Africa. It is becoming increasingly simple to set up a business, run a business, pay your taxes, pay your people, and do your business. In fact, the index that looks at the ease of doing business will be able to note and has noted that African countries are the ones that are growing exponentially in this index. They are the ones who are improving their process significantly to be able to capture capital and be able to bring investments into the nation of Africa, into all the countries of Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, ease of doing business is highly important, ladies and gentlemen. And what is happening to the rest of the world? The rest of the world is adopting legislation that is stifling the ease of doing business. How many permits do people need to apply for in Europe to be able to start up a business? How many government departments do they need to go and search around? How many environmental impact assessments and all these things do developers have to look for before investing in real estate? Ladies and gentlemen, Africa does not have all these things. In fact, many African countries are putting all these processes and all these things under one roof. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa is making doing business a lot easier. Ladies and gentlemen, watch out and you will see. Then the other thing is Africa has very ambitious people, ladies and gentlemen, because of the scarcity of resources as regards to opportunities for employment and things like that. Because there are a lot of young people who are looking for jobs and looking for opportunities. In the job market internationally, Africans are thriving and they are growing and they are occupying high positions around the world, ladies and gentlemen. They are eager and they are willing and they are growing and they are learning and they are doing great things, even in jobs, even outside of Africa. Look at any companies. The number of African people who are working in those companies are extremely ambitious. And that is just a test of what the rest of the population is. The young people down in the countryside and down in the cities in Africa are extremely ambitious. They are extremely creative, and given a little impetus and a little push, will be able to grow exponentially, ladies and gentlemen. You need an ambitious people to be able to grow. In these other countries, just for example, people have what is called safety nets, and they can be able to relax and can be able to work less hard. They can be able to explore opportunities less often. However, African countries and African young people do not have these safety nets, and for they are pushing to pursue goals even more aggressively because there's nothing to fall back onto, ladies and gentlemen. It is capitalism at its best, and Africa is doing capitalism like you've never seen. Ladies and gentlemen, wait and see. Young people are moving and they are growing. Ladies and gentlemen, the other thing is improved governance, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, go to any African countries, there is no active war. There is no active war in Africa. And the ones that have been there are quickly being resolved by the African Union and other African countries. African countries are no longer looking to the West to provide political solutions to political problems. They are coming together and providing a solution. The improved governance, the improved access to electoral justice, the improved court systems, and all these things are going and are making Africa to become quite an example for others to learn. In fact, many countries can be able to look into Africa and see examples of great governance, ladies and gentlemen. The times of war-torn Africa, poverty-stricken Africa are gone. They have gone with the wind, and the new Africa that is being born is great and is mighty, ladies and gentlemen. The other thing that you need to look at is great infrastructure, ladies and gentlemen. The amount of infrastructure that is happening on the continent will shock you, ladies and gentlemen. One example, just one project in Ethiopia, the Grand Renaissance Dam. It will become the 8th biggest hydroelectric power plant in the world. And it is self-funded by Ethiopians themselves. They are the ones who are constructing it. They are the ones who are providing raw materials for this place. Ladies and gentlemen, this power plant will be able to produce more than 5 times the amount of electricity that is needed in Ethiopia. One dam will be able to provide more than 5 times the current consumption of power in Ethiopia, ladies and gentlemen. Because of this, just this one infrastructure project will be able to provide cheap and available electricity. In fact, carbon-free electricity to the rest of 5 nations around Ethiopia. Ladies and gentlemen, infrastructure projects are great. They are impacting lives. Ladies and gentlemen, it was harder for Africans to trade with each other because the amount of goods that needed to be transported were transported over poor roads and rail networks. But the amount of rail infrastructure and road infrastructure and dams and things like that is coming up will shock you, ladies and gentlemen. And this is a big growth factor because Africa is becoming energy self-sufficient. It is becoming water self-sufficient. It is becoming food self-sufficient, and you only need to watch and see Africa becoming great and mighty. Ladies and gentlemen, then the other thing that you need not forget, Africa has vast available resources, ladies and gentlemen. If you look at Africa, there is coffee, there is tea, there is pyrethrum, there is gold, there is oil, there is everything that the world needs can be found in Africa, ladies and gentlemen. You do not need to go far to be able to see where diamonds are. You do not need to go far to be able to see where copper is. You do not need to go far to be able to see where lithium is. Lithium that is powering the next energy evolution, ladies and gentlemen. Most of this lithium is found cheaply and can be able to be mined cheaply from Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, the amount of vast resources in Africa will shock you. And that is why the West will always have fingers dipping into the resources cookie jar in Africa. Ask yourself, why won't the West just remain in the West? They are always looking, they are always hovering around Africa because they see the vast resources that Africa has, ladies and gentlemen. All that Africa needs to do is take these resources and process these resources and sell these resources out into the world, and they will be making billions, ladies and gentlemen. The amount of wealth that Africa has is supporting several European countries, and I will not mention them because I might be considered political. But however, there are countries in Europe that would die without Africa. Let it be said, ladies and gentlemen. The other thing that you need to consider is that the African unity and the AU integration is making great miles and is making great strides, ladies and gentlemen. We are currently going to have an AU passport that an African will be able to move to another African country without needing to have a passport from their country being stamped or having visa applications, ladies and gentlemen. They will be able to move across Africa just like Europeans are able to move across Europe by just getting through every point of entry without any restrictions. This is not just for people, but also for goods. Goods will be able to move from one place to the other. Ladies and gentlemen, I will shock you as I tell you, in several Francophone countries, ladies and gentlemen, Cote d'Ivoire, for example, do you know that there is always bread shipped all the way from France into Africa, into Cote d'Ivoire in the supermarkets? The bread goes for a paltry $20 a loaf. $20 a loaf, shipped every day from France, Paris, every day. Why? Because of the constant restrictions that African goods cannot be able to move across the country and be sold in Cote d'Ivoire. Ladies and gentlemen, because these barriers are being broken, this business is going to come to Africa, and this development and this market is going to be for Africans, driven by Africans, marketed for Africans, and growing Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, begin, watch, and you will see. Ladies and gentlemen, the other thing that you need to look at is Africa Union is coming up with an economic currency that will be able to be applied across Africa, ladies and gentlemen. There are 54 countries in Africa, and already they have ratified that they need to have the movement in place, and they are looking into having a union to be able to have one currency. Already a section of West Africa is already pursuing the objective of having ECO as a currency that will be able to be used by West African countries. Already in East Africa, there is the shilling, the East African shilling, that is being touted to be one of the currencies that will be able to apply across Africa, east of Africa, from Kenya to Uganda to Tanzania to Rwanda to South Sudan and many other countries. Ladies and gentlemen, African is making strides into making the common market viable, efficient, and able to serve all Africans. So Africa is moving the right direction. Ladies and gentlemen, we also need to look at the nature of assets that Africa has. Africa has real assets, ladies and gentlemen. You need to look at the Western world. Western world has around 10% of real assets that you can be able to touch. The rest are speculative assets. They are futures and tradable commodities that cannot be touched. They cannot be held. Why are these important? Ladies and gentlemen, these are forms of investments that cannot be touched or are not real assets. They are affected by economic slowdowns. They are affected by every economic slump down. Ladies and gentlemen, you just need to look at economic crisis. They do not affect Africa. Why? Because we do not have speculative assets. We do not have these tradable assets and futures and options and all these things that are highly speculative in nature, that are dependent on the demand in the market. Ladies and gentlemen, the stock market, for example, in the US is highly dependent and is highly in a bubble. It is dependent on how people perceive stocks, not on the real value of these stocks, on how people perceive stocks, on how people are going to take loans at cheap rates and buy shares that are overhyped and are overmarketed. Ladies and gentlemen, they do not follow the real value of the companies they invest in. So shares and stocks that form a majority part of the GDP there are from bubble assets. But in Africa, it is real assets that can be tangible, that can be tradable without any currency. If a currency fails completely, Africa can still trade with itself. Can Europe and America trade amongst themselves? Do they have real assets that can be able to trade with one another in a barter trade system, the most basic means of exchange? Ladies and gentlemen, I hope I'm shedding light. I have given you 13 reasons why Africa is going to be the next powerhouse. So sit back, either invest or don't invest, but Africa is moving despite you. And in spite of you, it is moving and is going to become the next powerhouse. Thank you. Remember to subscribe to the channel, to leave a comment, to like, and to let me know what you desire for me to cover in the next topics. Thank you and enjoy your day.